Well, hello, Dragon family. It is Thursday, middle of May. Nice to see everybody. Wanted to come on this week. Had a great question or a desire for a discussion, I would say, from one of my Dragon Hearts. Many of you have seen Marlene Umanra's post. She is Dragon Weaver. She's doing some amazing big global projects now, and she had mentioned how much she would like to know more about, because I'd mentioned it briefly in some of our class discussions, I think. She's now doing global work, and I have done activations all over, and I've also been called to places during my journey before I was even awake that are interestingly aligned with, for example, this came up because she has I want to say 13, either 12 or 13 sites that are the new Earth fifth dimensional chakra points that she is opening the portals and facilitating the handoff between the dragons and the Lyrans as the guardians of those portals. And I had been in touch with her, and knowing that I have a connection with the work each time, how interesting it was that I had already been to 9 of, I guess it was 12 places at the time, 9 of the 12 locations that are part of those earth chakras specifically. So places like Machu Picchu, Tibet, Cape Town, Egypt, the Luxor Temple, Glastonbury. Those are just to name a few, and there's quite a few. Obviously, there was at least 9 that I had already been to. And she had asked if I would talk about that and how I have been dismantling the 3D grids as I go and what that looks like, what that means, because many of you are being called to more active missions with energetic work, with ley lines, with maybe you come across a dragon, you know you're supposed to activate, or you feel like there's something you need to do as a portal guardian wherever you live. So I thought I would come on and share, just because Marlene had asked, some of the stories and where it goes back to, and to have a reflection point in your own journey of why you've been unconsciously going to certain places your whole life, even though you weren't awake yet, you didn't know of your spiritual path, your dharmic purpose, your real soul level work, any of that yet. And all of a sudden you realize, like, whoa, these places are aligned to this. And that's what happened for me. I've been on every continent except Antarctica. And I've just always had a gypsy blood, I guess. I've had that desire to pick up and go. Once I got a passport and I experienced overseas travel, it was set for me. That was just my fascination. And I've always been in linguistics, always wanted to study languages, studied French, Russian, German, Japanese, and Spanish. All but Spanish in an actual curriculum setting from 7th grade through college, and ended up being a linguistics major. So the cultural aspect, the language aspect, I've always been globally interested. And in my travels, one of the biggest things I will say is going back to all of these places, hello Esther, that I wasn't aware of, and I'll talk about some that I was aware of. But in all the places that I wasn't aware that they were spiritually connected, that they were portals that were drawing me, they were actually part of, I think, what activated and started my awakening. And the beauty is that once I woke to my work and come in hindsight to look back on or know places that I have activation work to do, the beauty is that in the energetic realms, I can, because I've been there in this physical body, revisit that location energetically without having to go back physically with all the cost of plane tickets and hotels and all the travel and everything involved, unless I happen to be going for other things as well. I can go back to those locations energetically because I've been there in this body. And if you're really astute, you can do that with locations you've lived in or been in other incarnational aspects, but that's a little different level ball game. So in my work now, I have been able to do that. And in activating that, the trigger question in her question for me that I found fascinating that I wanted to talk about was that she said, you know, you've been dismantling these 3D grids all over the globe. And indeed, that is unconsciously part of what I was doing. I was also picking up keys for myself. But now my work is more directly focused on that dismantling, whereas hers is opening and activating portals, and the transitioning, the passing of the batons between the dragons and the Lyrans. So one of my first experiences with a group of dragon hearts activating a specific set of locations where this dismantling was very much present for what I was doing. Hello, Anu Shara. Wonderful to catch you live all the way over in the African continent, way, way, way over there. Especially because it's probably quite late for you, my dear. In Sedona with my first Dragonheart group, unexpectedly, I knew there were going to be activations, but unexpectedly it turned into a much bigger piece, and there ended up being 4 corner points, very specific square or diamond configuration, and then a central apex point, and a full Merkaba opened up. And so this is where the dismantling of the grids really hit home for me, because when we got to the 3rd of the 5 points that needed to be activated, remember, energy work is always ahead of the physical. Your energy body is always out ahead of your physical, which is why things tend to happen 24, 48 hours. The energy starts moving before any of my sessions or classes with people, any of my programs. They start moving into it because the energy bodies are already connected. So on the 3rd of 5, I actually was able to see energetically what was happening with those 5 locations. And what I saw was an unpinning of the 4 corners, and a spinning around the apex, and a rotational unspinning of that Merkaba, so a diamond, or excuse me, a pyramid, 4-based pyramid above and 1 below, creating a diamond shape. That's the common Merkaba that we have even around us that we are now moving out of, because that has been the one energetic connection tool we have in humanity, in a 3D density in this dimensional space, to actually energetically connect and move or astral travel in different places. That's now shifting back to what it needs to be in its higher dimensional aspect to shift us into 5D. But the Earth also had those. So this was almost like a thumbtack or a push pin is how they showed me, as it lifted up and the 2 pyramids separated from each other. They showed me that that was starting to unpin the 3D skin or the 3D mask that was over the 3rd dimensional reality, that those anchor points were literally being pulled up every time I was doing that. So the ones I did in Europe, the ones I did in around Montreal with the air dragons, heart chakra, it's all that unpinning. And that's what I'm moving into doing as I start doing the heart chakras of all the 12 dragons of Mu around the globe. That will be my focus in the next coming years. But that was the literal pulling up and dismantling of the 3D grids starting. And so Montreal being done, across Europe through there's several smaller, what I was shown was smaller 4-pointed grids linked up with one of their corners to a larger 4-pointed grid, which linked up with one of its corners to a larger 4-pointed grid. And they kept expanding on that. So there were a couple that I did when I was in Europe several years ago. I want to say it was 2019, before my Tibet trip, and then around Kailash, doing 4 locations around Kailash, and then a focal point on the apex. So that's how it's dismantling. It's literally like what my work is in contrast to yours, Munra, because this was your question. And it's maybe just interesting for other people as you come on and realize, each of you, what your own dharmic purpose is. It may not be doing large global grids like mine, but you may have grids connected to the fairy kingdoms. You may have grids connected to specific lines of energy that are part of those larger systems that you are somehow part of the portal keepers for, or chose to incarnate there because you would be able to do that, or it's your location. Or even around the globe, that as things come in with your own work, maybe it's connected with crystals. I remember having to plot the locations of diamond mines around the world, or specific where there were known diamond locations, volcanoes, ancient forests, so the very, very ancient trees. Trying to remember all the different things we plotted, because it was a fascinating overlay as I was looking at the dragon grids of all these other factors that were coming in energetically as information. The diamonds, the ancient growth forests, the volcanic highlights, super volcanic specifically. I think those were the main ones. I'm sure there was one or two more, but I'm not thinking of them in this moment. But knowing that when you've traveled places and now can energetically reconnect to that, if you don't know how to do that, ask your guides, ask the dragons. The earth dragons would be a great ally for that, in how to move through the bandwidths in earth and the tunnel system, so to speak, that they have set up, or even through the ley lines to reconnect to those spaces that you've been before. I remember being called to Machu Picchu, and this is one of the sites. It's a big site for lots of things. It's a very focal, energetic point. And I had it on my radar for years, about 15 years. And finally it came in like, you need to go now. And I want to say it was possibly also 2019, maybe 2018. It was very unexpected how quickly it came in. It was early January. My guidance came in and said, you have to go this year. You have to be there by June. I was like, well, that's pretty specific. All right. So things rolled forward, got aligned with a group that was a very spiritually focused group, going to sacred sites. So that really unfolded perfectly. And what I discovered later was, as of July 1, 2 weeks after I was there, at the very end of my trip, all the regulations and rules changed for the Machu Picchu visiting of that site, where then you could only go in for a morning or an afternoon. You wouldn't have access all day. You would have to go with a guide. You could not free wander where you wanted to, or in which direction you wanted to. So everything changed, which would have changed what I was able to do energetically or experience energetically while I was there. And that was a very different, that was not a dismantling of a grid, but it was opening and a release of thousands of dragons, because that entire mountain, the inside of it is a gigantic rookery, which is very similar to, if you've ever watched the How to Train Your Dragon movies, and the one where the gigantic, like, ice dragon king, the lair of that, where all these thousands of dragons are bringing in sacrifices and feeding the large dragon in that mountain. It wasn't like that with a large dragon being fed, but it was a rookery with thousands and thousands in it. And that portal I was able to actually open. That was why I was being called there, and allowing that to be now accessible both through the inner planes of Earth and outside in both directions. So the dragons were super excited, and I had an amazing experience there with that. So if you have specific questions about places I've been, I guess I could find my list. I know that Luxor, Egypt, Glastonbury, Cape Town, and Machu Picchu and Tibet were specific sites of the five of the 9 that I knew I had been to. One that I haven't been to is Afghanistan. And I find it interesting that that's on her radar, because there is, right on the border there, one of the 2 dragons that were pinning down this massive, beautiful dragon in the Asian continent. That was partly what we were doing, releasing her when I was in Tibet. She's beautiful. You can see her on Google Earth. If you look into it, maybe I can post that picture and share it later on, if I remember to. But there are 2 specific, one in Tibet and one along that sort of Afghanistan, Pakistan, it's not Pakistan, Iraqi, it's either Iraq or Iran border. And I apologize that my Middle Eastern geometry is not great, not up to par. I know all the names of the countries, but I always don't remember specifically where they are, only because I haven't traveled there. I'm a visual learner, and I see things by experiencing them firsthand, and then it's just registered in my brain. So that's interesting to me, that her wings were pinned down on either side. And I feel like that's the one that was in Tibet, and then the one that is connected to the portal where Uman Ra is being led to go, are very connected. So it's always interesting to see what information comes out and how it gets shared and interconnected in networks, because there's always an overlap. We're here as a team globally, all the light workers, particularly all the dragons, to work together. and bring this large dismantling of the 3D expansion into the 5D together. And we all have a different role to play. So hopefully that was sort of fun for stories. If you generated any specific questions, please put them in the comments so that we can talk about it more on either next week or the week after. I'm not sure if I'm going to get to do a live next week. It's going to depend on my signal. I will be traveling. I'll be back in Wyoming next week. Have to oversee a project, so may not be on next week, but wishing you guys a beautiful, at least we're here having some gorgeous spring weather. Hope that in the southern hemisphere where you are, it's beautiful fall weather and not going Arctic cold yet on you. All right, bye for now, everybody. We'll see you next time.